Mr. Tillis, did you murder Jody Gunter?
Absolutely not.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Okay. Cross-examination?
Mr. Tillis, to begin, I want to make sure that we're clear about, have you ever been convicted of a felony?
Yes, sir.
And that the number was 14, correct?
I believe that was the number. Yes, sir.
Okay, you know it's the number,
Yes, sir.
correct? Okay. And you have been convicted of a crime involving dishonesty or false statement, correct?
Yes, sir. I believe I have one of those.
Okay. And in this very case, just a few minutes ago, you coined the phrase strategic perjury. What does that mean to you?
That means when you're facing death and you know that this man is going to go in front of a jury and lie to the jury and get you a death penalty because he's written it in a letter to the cops. I'll testify against Mr. Tillis. He was telling the detective, I'll go into the courtroom and I'll lie and I'll get Mr. Tillis a death penalty.
Well,
So despair, depression, desperation. I strategically perjure myself. I forge a note and I trick him to tell the truth. I did that.
Right. You will perjure yourself when strategically it benefits you, correct?
I think when the truth is involved, all means are on.
Mr. Tillis, when the truth is involved, lying is what is necessary. Is that what you're saying?
No, that is not what I'm saying.
Mr. Tillis, you have the greatest interest of any witness in how this case is decided, correct?
To be honest with you, I don't really care about the death penalty, Mr. Mizrahi.
Okay. So
I'll
you
wear
don't have
it.
an interest in how this case is decided?
My testimony isn't about that.
Okay, so you, as you sit here today, you have no care in the world whether this jury convicts you or not.
I trust fate.
Okay, faith.
Well, what's to be is what's to be. My testimony isn't about me eluding the death penalty. That's really not what this is about right now.
Okay, it's about strategic perjury.
No.
Now, your statements on the wire would convict you of all 4 charges, correct?
My statement on the wire can do what?
Would be enough to convict you of first-degree murder, kidnapping, human trafficking, and abuse of a dead human body, correct?
Well, there's a case law doctrine called corpus delicti. I don't believe you've ever proved the body of the kidnapping or the human trafficking.
You didn't hear the testimony about Jody Gunter's dismembered body just by the medical examiner?
How is that the body of a kidnapping? You're telling me Joni Gunter's remains constitutes a kidnapping? Okay. I don't understand that one.
Let me ask this one at a time. You would
Okay.
agree that if what you said on the wire is true, you're guilty of first-degree murder, correct?
If I said what...
If what you said to Sammy Evans is true, you're guilty of first-degree murder, correct?
If what I said to him is true, it wasn't true.
I understand that.
Okay?
I'm giving you a hypothetical.
Hypothetical situation. If it was
Yes.
true, yes, I would be subject to that.
If hypothetically, if what you said is true, you'd be guilty of kidnapping, correct?
Yes, sir.
Hypothetically, if what you said was true, you would be guilty of human trafficking, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And hypothetically, if what you said was true, you would be guilty of abusing a dead human body,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir. I'll give you that.
So I want to go through and discuss with you all the truth that exists in that recorded statement, okay?
Well, that may be a problem because I don't remember all of what's in the statement. It's
Okay,
rather...
Don't worry, Mr. Tillis, I remember, we got it recorded, so
Well-
we'll just go through it. I think this will be real easy for us.
Okay.
all right?
I'll try to,
Your address that you lived at, 3551 Bowden Circle East, was true, correct?
yeah, that was true.
And you lived there, correct?
Yes, sir, that was true.
And in the main part of the house, at least, forgetting the trailer part, you live there alone, correct?
Yeah, I'll say that.
Okay? And your house was scheduled to be condemned and demolished, correct?
I don't think it had been scheduled at that time, but
You're right, it was not scheduled. It had been condemned, and at some point, it was going to be demolished.
well, the condemned notice had been hung on the fence, but the scheduled demolition, not to my knowledge.
You knew that it was possible that based on the condemned notice, that your house would be demolished.
Well, there's always a possibility.
Right, and that's what you were talking about.
On the wire,
Yes, sir.
it was a prelude to introduce the statement.
I understand it was a prelude, but it was a true prelude.
Yes, sir.
correct? Yes, sir, is the answer, right? Okay.
Well, I did know that the place was condemned, and it was possible to be scheduled for demolition because of the condemned notice. Yes, sir.
Okay. And it is true that you had had multiple problems with all of your neighbors, correct?
Yeah, I believe that's rather evident from the record.
Okay. And you talk about that on your wire, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's true that you would operate your power equipment like saws at night, correct?
No,
It's true you would operate your power washer at all times during the day and night, correct?
no,
It's true that noises would be coming out of your house late at night, correct?
well, I don't know what you consider noises. Slamming the door?
Screaming and yelling?
No, that's not true.
All right, all that's fabrication.
Pretty much all of it, yes, sir.
You did hang large tarps surrounding your entire property, correct?
Yes, sir, I had,
Was that to keep out the burglars?
no, that was keep the neighbors from, the harassment. On one side of me, the neighbor was so obsessed that he mounted his security cameras on top of the telephone pole so he could watch me over the fence.
Your tarps were there to conceal what you were doing in that house, correct?
How did the tarps in the yard have anything to do with what I'm doing in the house?
Yes or no, Mr. Tillis?
No, that's not why they were there.
Mr. Tillis, it is true that you owned a Sawzall reciprocating saw during this time period, correct?
Actually, I own multiple ones, multiple skill saws, multiple chainsaws. The reason they aren't in the photographs of the garage is because someone went in there and stole my truck and all my tools during the first week I was in jail. That garage was full of tools. Probably had $30,000 worth of hand tools. I owned a home improvement business at one point, and the tools were left over. I had multiple saws, multiple sawzalls, pretty much any sort of home repair tool that you would need to work on your house.
Okay. And you had multiple Sawzall blades, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you had lots of wetlands and woods that were just down the street from your house, correct?
yes, sir.
Right? Pottsburg Creek, right?
Well, the area's not that big, but there is a 3-lake called Morgan Lake down there, 3 lakes joining. Been fishing in that lake since I was 5 years old.
You know it well.
Yes, sir, I do.
And hypothetically, Mr. Tillis, if you were to hide something there, a body, dismembered bodies in there, it would be hard to find, correct?
I think it would be even harder to get the body down there.
Now, if you chopped it up and stuck it in a backpack and biked your way down there and dug it up and came out of the woods with a shovel, would it, Mr. Tillis?
Well, I hear you tell it. I mean, I guess not.
No, it's how you tell it, not how I tell it. These
Okay.
are your words, Mr. Tillis.
My words on the recording. You're right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Tillis, you do have chains hanging in your garage, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it would be consistent with what you said to Sammy Evans that you would hang your victims to dismember them, correct?
I don't know if I stated that in that particular language, but I would concede that, yes, those chains in the ceiling that were used for pulling motors out of cars, they could be used for anything.
Okay.
They were stationary chains that were never taken down and never put up. They just stayed there all the time.
Well, certainly you're not going to pull the motor out of the car from the chain that's just hanging down a little bit, right? There had to be another chain that would get lower so you could pull out a motor, right?
Generally, it was a come along.
Okay, but we didn't see those.
No, you
They
didn't.
must have been stolen with the Sawzall.
I don't know if they were still in the garage or whether they were taken. I haven't been out to go inspect the garage.
I understand.
But there were come-alongs in the garage.
Okay.
I will
But
say
you
that.
would agree that your garage had plenty of room to be able to complete the task of dismemberment of a body, correct?
It was a facility that could be used for that, yes, sir.
Facility, that was your word, right?
Yes, sir.
A
Well,
facility that
a
could be
building, a facility.
Very good.
Or-
Now, you would agree that you know a lot of women on drugs and that prostitute themselves, correct?
Well, I grew up in that area. Most of them, I know their mothers and their brothers and their families.
Okay. And you had a lot of their paperwork in your house, correct?
Well, that paperwork in the house wasn't just from that. I also wrote pen pals in prison. As you stated, or one of the witnesses stated, I believe, that it might have been Detective Sullivan, that there were information from girls that were incarcerated. They were in prison. I wrote them because when you're in jail and you don't get no mail, you don't have no money, I kind of know what that feels like. So I would go to the internet and I would go onto the pen pal list and I'd pick a couple and I wrote them. I'd send them a few dollars. And many of those names were associated with that. They were people that were incarcerated. Some of them were never getting out.
So, you knew, I'm going to go through some of the names of the people that were in your house.
Okay?
Okay? Mr. Tillis, because in your wire, you describe how you would pick up these girls, Phillips Highway, get them back to your house, and then you would do all the things you said you would do about human trafficking.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about these girls. These are some of the girls that maybe you met on Phillips Highway.
Okay.
Christina Habib, Habeed, a prostitute she met you at the BP station on Phillips Highway to engage in sex acts.
Okay.
You know her?
I don't know. Refresh my memory.
I'm sorry, say that?
Refresh my memory.
She said that she willingly got in your car and then drove off to St. Augustine where you became aggressive with her.
State that again. I missed that, sir.
All right, it doesn't matter. So you're not sure if you know her or not.
Well, if you refresh my memory, it may jog my memory. I mean, sometimes my memory's a little bad, but I mean, it's not real bad. Sometimes a little jog would help me.
Picture, would that help?
Probably not, because
Probably not.
I don't know.
Would it refresh your memory?
I was thinking maybe you had some sort of paperwork you wanted to address that might, I don't know. Generally, if I don't know the girl's family or her brother or her father or her mother or know her from some other source, those girls generally go by names that are just street names, and and I wouldn't recognize the name. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So-
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may?
Counsel, Christina Habib has mentioned.
Hmm. No, she doesn't look familiar. Not that I recall.
Okay, we'll go to another one.
Okay.
Danielle Goodwin. You know her? You picked her up at a bus stop. 16th and Main Street, where you have your little shop.
Hmm.
What about her?
No, it doesn't ring a bell. Do you remember the year?
Sure, 2016.
16?
I'm sorry, that's the one we spoke to her. That's the wrong year. I
Oh.
don't have the year in front of me.
You say I was
Know
in,
her or not?
I don't remember the name.
How about Contessa Flerner, Flener?
Okay,
They're at a
Tessa's,
Hess station on San Juan Avenue.
Tessa's a pretty unusual name. I would seem like I would recall that, but I don't.
Okay. What about Brittany Proctor?
Mm,
Pumping gas at Smokers Express on Bay Meadows.
no, I don't.
What about Alyssa Weber? She knew you as Rusty.
No.
Nothing?
Well, if she's using the name Rusty, then it could be a childhood, because that was a nickname that I abandoned probably in my early 20s. Since 2021, no one's called me that.
Okay.
People call me Russell now. So that probably is a very old, if she's addressing me by that particular name.
Well, but she was working probably in 2014 as a prostitute off Phillips Highway. Remember anything about that?
No, she wouldn't be calling me Rusty at that time. I was,
Julie Ann Williams.
yeah, I knew her father.
You know her, right?
I knew her father,
Well,
yes.
she was working as a prostitute too in the Mayport area when you picked her up, right?
Mm. Yeah, I believe so. I worked with her father one time, and he lived over there on the trailer park on Beach Boulevard by, maybe right at St. John's Bluff and Beach, that Winn-Dixie. There was a trailer park in there. Ronnie was his name, I think.
She actually stayed with you, right?
Off and on, she would come there back and forth
Until she got away.
till she got away.
Yeah, until she fled out of a window. Remember that?
I don't recall that incident, no.
How about Michelle Pierce?
I believe she's deceased.
You have anything to do with that?
I was in jail.
No, I know you didn't. Ms. Pierce said that she lived with you, stayed with you for time too.
Hold on. Sure. Members of the jury, I think I've already told you this once before. In the pre-COVID era, an attorney asking to approach would be a simple matter. We just come up here and we'd all huddle together. They don't like me to do that these days. So to keep everybody socially distant, I'm going to need the jury to exit the courtroom for just a few moments. Remember, do not discuss the case.
Kimberly Bowling, I think she dated you for about 6 weeks in 2013.
No, sir, I'm not familiar with that person.
You didn't meet her on Belfort Road, nothing?
No, sir, I'm not familiar with that person.
How about her own daughter, Ashley Fleming? Do you know her?
I'm not familiar with that person, Your Honor.
And how about a Jessica Summerlin?
No, sir, I'm not familiar with that person.
I want to talk for a second about the police officer case, all right? I think you were clear on direct, but I want to make it very clear
Yes, sir.
that you pled because the state wanted to get forward on this case, correct? That's why the negotiation happened.
Well, the best of my recollection, Leah Hogg was prosecuting the case, and you were,
No, just yes or no, Mr. Tillis.
yes, sir, that's exactly what you did.
And you pled to, it was well over 2 years of time served, right? You probably know the number of days.
I don't remember the days, but I would assume that you're correct, because it was at least a year and a half, yeah.
You pled guilty to the felony battery of a law enforcement officer.
I believe that was the final charge. It was reduced down on the agreement that it would just go away if you plead to it, and it wouldn't be used in this case, but I see now that it is.
I don't want to debate you about that.
Yeah.
But you're the one that brought it all up, not
Yes, sir,
me.
I did.
Okay. So, when you were discussing with your defense attorney the idea of Sammy Evans intimidating you.
I missed the last part. I was just,
Sammy Evans intimidating you. Remember
yes,
that?
sir, yes, sir.
Okay. You would agree that Sammy Evans is a big fella. He's tall. He's much taller than you, right?
He's a little bigger than me, yes, sir.
And he would be a good person to know in jail to protect you, correct?
Well, I don't think that would be true.
He wouldn't protect you?
No, sir.
You weren't friends with him?
I was an associate with him in regards to trading legal advice until I became associated with him with the fabrication of that confession, and then it manifested into him pursuing his own agenda and getting that wire, in which manifested into me being in a cell and being coerced into that confession with a lot of complicating, mitigating factors of depression and despair, and so it gets real complicated. But I wouldn't say that I was a friend of Sammy Evans. Absolutely not.
You just played chess with him.
Actually, I didn't do that much either. He took me out to that chess table and as an extension of that interrogation.
You used a phrase, Mr. Tillis, that when Sammy was trying to get you to talk, you told him no. You said that no means no, right?
Well, when he took me into the cell and he showed me that pre-wrote note, and I took the pad, and he found the pencil and he gave it to me, I wrote on there, "I told you no," and I gave the pad back to him. I had told him previously that I wanted to recant my decision about the police because I feared that the police would never give him a recording device and let him loose inside that jail like that. That kind of shocked me.
So, Mr. Tillis, my question is, in your mind, when you say no, that means no, right?
Well, it depends.
Okay, depends. You have a loose meaning of the word no.
Well, as my attorney can testify to, inside that jail is an emotional roller coaster up and down. One minute you might say no because the circumstances warrant no, but you might in another situation for the same response want to do a yes. It's an emotional roller coaster ride. You put despair, depression, circumstances, a no may turn into a yes or a yes may turn into a no. And one thing I do, I concede that sometimes no's turn into yeses and yeses turn into no's. Man, I'm only human.
That it?
Yeah.
I want to understand your motive because you've testified that at one time you were so despondent that your plan was to commit suicide by confessing to a murder, correct?
Yeah, it's called suicide by state.
Suicide by cop I've heard of, where
Well-
a person would attack a police officer and kind of force that police officer to kill them.
It's certainly a branch off of suicide by state.
Okay, but your suicide by state, Mr. Tillis, you've told this jury you're a pretty smart guy when it comes to the law, right?
And some occasions, it depends on the subject, but sometimes yes.
So your plan, when your home is about to be demolished, or at least can be demolished, right?
Yes, sir.
And you just have found out about that your plan is, I'm going to tell the world about the dismembered body in my yard, so multiple years from now, I might face the death penalty. That was your plan.
Well, before I,
No.
yes, no, it's actually a no, because what I did was, first I looked into the longest time on death row is 30 years. The shortest time was 4.1 years. You could effectively waive all appeals and be dead in about 3.5. So when you say multiple years, yes, I concede to a murder I didn't commit. I get the death penalty, it's suicide by state. I go to a one-man cell where I have a TV, and then I would engage in meditation and prepare myself for death. That's exactly what I was going to do. And I was going to take those 3 years to do that.
Okay, but there would certainly be many other ways you could kill yourself, right?
Well, I can't argue with that.
And those things would be available to you in jail, right?
Well, I might argue that.
Well, you already testified that you went through this elaborate plan to get all these drugs to try to kill yourself.
Yeah, and it didn't work.
Well, you could have taken 2,000 milligrams, right?
Well, I guess I should have gave up 10 trays of food, 20 trays, I don't know, but it didn't work.
Okay.
But one thing about an attempted suicide like that, you don't know if it's going to work. And I don't know much about pills. I've never really been a pill person.
Mr. Tillis,
So I don't
you don't
know.
know if any of these things are going to work, but you're more confident that you're going to falsely confess to somebody in the yard and that maybe you're going to get the death penalty in the future if they find this body than you are of doing any other method.
Well, one thing about conceding to a murder that I didn't commit and fabricating that confession is that once the police got it and they're rushed to justice and handing the case to you, I was assured a death sentence,
Okay,
as my sitting here is evident.
right. How many years after you were arrested?
I don't know. I guess I've been in jail, and I'm only guessing, probably 10 months, maybe inside of a year.
I understand that, but you were charged with the murder at the end of 2016.
Oh, I thought you were talking about when I was first arrested. From when I was first arrested till this alleged confession was about 10 months
Okay.
or something like that. I'd only been in jail about a year when this bogus confession come into existence.
Mr. Tillis, you wanted the death penalty, but one of the reasons why you were backing out of it was because you were scared you were going to get in trouble?
No.
Yeah, you said. So you said, Mr. Tillis, I couldn't believe I was worried they were going to send a monitor.
And then I was going to get in
And
trouble.
then I was
When
going
they
to
go,
get caught for this fabrication
and then get in trouble.
and then get in trouble.
And I said that. But what you're misinterpreting, what is the trouble? The trouble is,
What do you care about trouble, Mr. Tillis? You're looking at 30 years.
That's
You're
my-
so despondent that you think you're never going to get out of jail, true?
and that's the trouble I was speaking of.
That doesn't make any sense. You're saying that you know you're never going to get out of jail, you're going to do 30 years, true?
Mm-hmm.
And then you decide to back out of the confession because you're worried you're getting in trouble.
May I
Doesn't make
explain?
any sense, Mr.
May I explain what trouble means?
You tell us how those two things make sense.
Because if I gave up that body and I fabricated this confession and it was proved to be false and they caught me in that, the trouble was I would still have the 30. I wouldn't have gained anything. There's nothing there. There's no incentive to fabricate the story if I'm only going to get the same thing I'm going to get for the aggravated assault. The only incentive for fabricating the story was the death penalty that I knew the state would seek. So if I gave up that and I fabricated this confession, and then you sought the death penalty, then I'm receiving my agenda. But if I fabricated this confession and I got caught, and then I would get in trouble for fabrication, and I'd end up with a life sentence, which I already had. It was between the mental despair and the depression. I didn't see any reason in doing it. I honestly didn't think they were going to give him a wire and let him in there like that. That shocked me.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
So, you have testified that there was no way that you could know how Joni Gunter was killed, right?
I had
That's
no-
why you didn't provide that information, correct?
Well, that was only one hole in the story. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And a homicide detective, which,
That was my only question, Mr. Tillis.
okay,
I
yes,
gave you
sir.
a couple hours.
You're right, I didn't know. I didn't know the cause of death, and that was the problem.
Now, Mr. Tillis, in the first wire, do you remember you, not Mr. Evans, you uttering the words to Mr. Evans, quote, "I didn't shoot them girls"? Remember that?
I may have said I didn't shoot anybody, yes, sir. I'm not going to contest your,
Well, it's in the wire.
yeah, so I'm not going to contest it. Okay, I said that,
Right, you said that.
yeah.
You said, "I didn't shoot them girls." You slipped up, Mr. Tillis, because if you didn't know how they were killed, then why are you telling Sammy Evans that you didn't shoot them? Because they could have very well been shot, and your entire scheme is up.
Because I didn't know. I also said I didn't stab
They
him.
have been shot.
I also said I didn't stab him. I also said I didn't hit him in the head with a hammer. I believe those were other allegations he made too.
Mr. Tillis, there's two separate parts. There's the part in the second wire.
Mhm.
He's saying that because he says, almost like you've already talked about it, right? He says, well, you don't shoot them because it's too noisy. You don't stab them because it's too, I remember that. That's what you're
Yeah.
talking. I'm
That's
talking
the
about
part
much
I
more-
remember. That's the
talking
part I
about
remember.
Wire number 1 on the 5th. Not on the 10th, the 5th.
Okay. Okay.
Where you tell Sammy, "I didn't shoot them girls."
Okay.
You see, Mr. Tillis?
And
You
you-
said that,
And your
but
point,
if we're to believe your story, Joni Gunter very well may have been shot in that chest by your brother, right?
anything could have been possible.
Okay, you
I
slipped
did.
up.
I didn't know the method the method that caused her death, but making that statement,
Why on earth wouldn't you just lie about it? If we're to believe you, Mr. Tillis, why on earth wouldn't you sit on this wire and tell, like you said, I think you were talking about all the psychologists and it just kind of spews out? Why not just make up how you killed her? What's the difference?
I don't understand what you lost me on that one, Mr. Mizrahi.
Mr. Tillis, you're making up this wild story to get the death penalty.
Okay.
All things that aren't true, correct?
Most of yes.
All these things that in theory, we could prove them to be false, correct?
Okay.
Yet, The only thing you don't lie about is the manner of death. Why not lie about that?
I kind of don't understand what you're saying. You're trying?
Your goal was to get the death penalty, correct?
Yes, sir.
And everything you're saying in this 3-hour wire, you're saying you're making it up in order to get the death penalty.
Yes, sir. That's my agenda. Yes,
Right.
sir.
But yet, that's your agenda. Yet you're withholding the one piece of information that we would need.
The method that she met her death.
Right. Why wouldn't you just make it up? You made up everything else. Isn't it true, Mr. Tillis, that you told Sammy Evans that you beat her with a hammer, and that's why he knew to ask you about it?
He asked me, did I stab her or did I cut her throat?
He was trying to get you to say it on the wire.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Isn't it true you told Sammy Evans you beat her with a hammer?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Now, your testimony is, with regard to Tabitha Nicole Hogg, that everything that she says is essentially true, except for the main incident in question, correct?
Well, she definitely wasn't chained to that tree in my backyard.
I got that. I got that.
The tree didn't exist.
I understand that. Some people can say tree, and they really mean a pole, right?
Well, I don't know. She was pretty specific in describing the tree during the hearing we had. I believe the transcript.
Phyllis, when you're high on heroin, sometimes you confuse a pole with a tree.
And I believe you could also confuse all sorts of situations with other situations when you've been on a 5-day binge of heroin. That is an excellent point, Mr. Mizrahi.
Mr. Tillis, do you think you can confuse your semen being rubbed on her face after you've raped her? You think she confused that?
Well, she's pretty confusing. 5 days worth of heroin binge. 5 days of not sleep. You know, sleep deprivation causes hallucination.
Okay.
It is a medical fact.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Tillis, for your legal and medical opinions. We
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
that. Now, Mr. Tillis, your testimony is that even with your goodwill towards Tabitha Hogg, in other words, writing her letters, you talk about how it's so lonely in jail, and you want to be that friendly voice for her, that friendly person, right? And that she helps you get boxes of Sudafed, and you give her a place to stay, and all of those things, correct?
My interest in her wasn't really being friendly, so to speak, but if you want to context it like that,
Well,
okay.
My point is, she was telling the truth about that stuff.
She was telling the truth about the jail, about the Sudafed. Yeah, some of the things she said were factual.
So your direct testimony was that despite all of the great things you've done for her, that Tabitha Nicole Hogg got mad at you because she showed up to your house unannounced when it was raining and you wouldn't give her a ride. That's your testimony.
She retrieved her stuff and then she wanted to ride and I told her to leave because I had something to do and it was raining. She got mad. She left. I made her leave and she took it a little hard. But
And so that's the only thing you've ever done to her that would cause Tabitha Nicole Hogg, a heroin addict, a prostitute, to come in here and make up all the stuff that she made up, right?
well, you would have to understand a heroin user's mentality. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying.
So your idea of what she did is that this happened. She doesn't report it for how many years? So when did this happen? 2013?
I don't know when she alleged it. I don't think she gave a date. She said it was after her release from jail, whenever the date she was released from jail was.
But you know the
can't-
day that she showed up. And
Well, I don't
you
remember the
were
date and the
right.
year. I don't even remember when she got out of the jail, to be honest with you, Mr. Mizrahi.
Well, it's between 2012 and what, 2015?
But I did pick her up from the jail. I do remember that event, whatever date that was.
Her plan is to never tell a soul about what happened to you,
Okay?
and then wait until Joni Gunter's dismembered remains are found and a detective comes knocking on her door to suddenly spring her angry trap about how you would not give her a ride in the rain, therefore you must have chained her to her bed and raped her.
You would have to take that with her, Mr. Mizrahi. You're asking me to make assumptions for the way she thinks and feels, and I don't think that I'm in a position to be doing that. I know that 5-day binges of heroin, that drug does pretty bad things to you, and the sleep deprivation added to the heroin use, it gets pretty complicated when you add that with depression. I don't know what the girl thinks or how she feels. I mean, I know our experience when we were associated, but if you want to continue to ask those questions, you would probably be better off to direct them toward her.
Why on earth, Mr. Tillis, for a girl that you casually knew, that you knew was mad at you after you wouldn't give her a ride, would you have her name, date of birth, social security number written on papers in your home?
Well,
How do you have her social security number?
the time of, because when I looked her up to get the information so that I could give her money, and she had initially asked me to appear at her court date. I don't remember how that came about, but when she was sentenced in St. Johns County, I was present. I remember that. But to look up the information on her, she had gave me that information so that I could obtain information on her on the computer. The time frame between when she was released from jail, I don't know that date, to the time frame of my arrest, I don't know that. The papers laying there, they were probably just in a bundle of papers, and they were just neglectfully forgotten, I would assume. I mean, I don't recall the specifics of it, Mr. Mizrahi.
Need her social security number for that kind of thing?
I don't recall, to be honest with you, but that's how that information, if I'm not mistaken, it was written on some sort of jail piece of paper or something, but I'm guessing. But that information was related to me finding out information so I could be at the court hearing, and then she got sentenced, and then she went to jail, and she got I think she got 60 days. I'm not even sure exactly, but it wasn't long in jail. But, I mean, I don't know.
See on your screen, Mr. Tillis? State's Exhibit 100?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I see that.
Well, you have her social security number and your DL number. What do you need that for?
Well, you've asked me that question 3 times, and I've tried to answer it 3 times, Mr. Mizrahi. I don't know. I mean, I was looking up information. I'd went to the jail. I'd visited her. I put money on her books. I had been to a couple of hearings. I mean, I don't know.
All right.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Tillis, you would agree that besides your theory of suicide by state,
Yes, sir.
there is never a situation where it is in a person's interest to come in and confess to murder, correct?
It
That
is
would be a statement against your own interest, correct?
absolutely not. If I'm seeking suicide by state, then it is my best interest to fabricate whatever is necessary information, provide it to the police, and to seek my agenda by getting the suicide by state.
I said besides that, unless you want to commit suicide, except for that theory, generally speaking, confessing to murder is against your own interest, correct?
Well, and I wouldn't say no, and I wouldn't say yes.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes you might do something your conscience weighs on you, you know,
Okay.
and you go back and you concede what you did and you try to rectify your conscience. It's not about the other person, it's about how you feel.
Okay.
That's why I was telling you earlier, this isn't about me right now trying to avoid the death penalty. I actually expect these people to convict me of murder and you to give me that death penalty. I could really care less.
Okay, very good. Now, you knew that Joni Gunter had been murdered, correct?
Well, she was deceased when I viewed her in the trunk of that car, yes, sir.
And she was all bloody, right?
She had a large blood stain on her chest. I actually thought that was the fatal wound when I first observed her. I didn't find out later until I read the autopsy she had a broke nose. Then I realized she probably got the blood on her chest from the punch in the face.
But at that point, Mr. Tillis, you haven't talked about what happened next.
Next about what?
Well, what did you do with her body to get Joni Gunter out of that trunk? How did you get her out of the trunk? Start with that.
Well, at this point in the interrogation, I am going to claim the Fifth Amendment, and I'm not going to make any more statements regarding that question as a means to protect myself from any future associations. This trial will undoubtedly manifest into a second trial. This isn't the first one. There's been too many errors in this trial I will be most definitely be brought back for a second one. And in the second trial, I don't want this testimony hindering me in the future. So I'm not going to discuss what occurred after my brother arrived and we had that discussion at the trunk of that car. I will concede to telling you, Mr. Mizrahi, that I knew Miss Gunter was buried in that backyard. I knew the condition of the body, and I was present. I'll concede that to you here and now, but you can continue to ask me questions, and I will not answer them.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. You're
Okay.
charged, you understand, with grossly abusing a dead human body, right?
Count 4, yes, sir.
Okay. And you would agree that you knew the location of every body part, correct?
I just told you that I was present.
Well, then, but answer
I
my
think
question.
I've answered your question before you asked it.
You knew
I
where
was-
you knew where her torso was?
I was present.
You knew where her head was?
I was present when Miss Gunter was buried. I just told you that. The questions seem irrelevant.
They're not relevant when you're charged with count 4, Mr. Tillis.
Well, I just told you I was present when her remains were buried, Mr. Marahi. I don't know how much more specific I can get.
Who buried her?
Now, that is a different question. And as I just said, this trial was only the prelude to the second one. And I'm not going to be answering those questions that will prejudice me in my next trial. I know that sounds rather bad, but from a legal position, I don't mind sitting here and giving up what I know, but that particular amount of information I'm going to retain until I come back. And if anybody wants to hear those answers, I would suggest coming to the next trial. And that's when I will be telling you that, if you are the prosecutor in that case.
Okay. What's it like to use a sawzall to cut a woman's head off?
I have no answer for that question either, Mr. Mizrahi.
What's it like? Did the sawzall blade wear out when you were cutting her shoulders? Did you have to use multiple blades?
I believe I just told you that I wouldn't answer any questions regarding that subject. If your intention is to just continue to ask questions that you know I won't answer for the benefit of the jury hearing you, then you simply recite all your questions and I'll sit here mute, and then when you get finished, we can move on to the next set of questions if you have any more.
Mr. Tillis, you wanted to tell the jury your story, right?
Yes, sir, I do.
Mr. Tillis, that was your decision, right?
It was my decision, and I will tell
You
the...
freely and voluntarily got on that witness stand, didn't you?
Yes, sir, and the judge made...
You are freely and voluntarily withholding evidence from this jury, correct?
I am selecting when I will disclose information and when I will not. That is what I'm doing. And in the end,
Perjury, huh, Mr. Tillis?
I didn't say anything about perjury. I said I am selecting when I will disclose information and when I will not. I do not intend on holding that information from the jury at the proper time. This is not the proper time for me to be disclosing that information. No, sir.
Well, you know I can't make you, Mr. Tillis.
I understand that. That's why I suggested that you just state all your questions, get them out, I'll set mute, and then we'll move on. I understand the rule, Mr. Marahi.
What rule?
The rule you just said. You can't force me to answer the question.
Well, we could force you by contempt and things like that, but Mr.
I'm
Tillis,
fixing to get the death penalty. The contempt charge really doesn't concern me.
right, I'm not going to torture you to get the answer,
Yeah, okay.
right? So, I mean, I got it.
All
How
right.
about this, Mr. Tillis? Hypothetically speaking, of course. How long does it take to chop up a human body?
And I will revert back to my previous statement that I am not in the position to be discussing any information regarding that subject.
Okay. Mr. Tillis, would you not agree to this? It's difficult to dismember a human body, forgetting whether you did it to Joni Gunter or not. I understand your position. I'm just saying, generally speaking, if your knowledge and experience of cutting metal and cutting wood and doing construction, that dismembering a human being would take time and effort, correct?
As I stated earlier, Mr. Marahi, I prefer not to answer any questions regarding this subject.
You would agree it would take hours, right?
I'm not agreeing to anything.
You would agree that in order to dismember a human body, you would need privacy, correct?
I'm not agreeing to that.
The kind of privacy a six-car garage has, correct?
Continue on.
the kind of privacy that a bunch of tarps hanging around your house provides, correct?
You can continue on.
The kind of privacy that a booby-trapped fenced yard provides, correct?
You can continue on.
You knew that Joni Gunter was dead, correct?
Yes, sir. My initial belief that she was deceased when she arrived at the residence. Yes, sir.
And no matter how homeless or how lonely a person is, there's probably somebody out there that would be looking for him, right?
That's what I've been trying to tell you. That's why I'm sitting here. It's got nothing to do with me avoiding the death penalty, and it's got nothing to do with the case. That's why I'm sitting here.
But you did nothing, absolutely nothing, Mr. Tillis, to try to bring justice to the death of Joni Gunter.
I'm caught in between two traps. One, I got my brother standing there looking at me, and I got that girl deceased in the trunk of the car. My brother's confronted me many times with this same sort of situation, helped me, and yes, maybe that was the wrong decision, all right? But I did it. And now I'm sitting here, and I'm telling you I did it, okay?
No, you're not telling us you did.
Well-
You're invoking your constitutional
I'm trying to tell you as much as I can tell you at this point.
right against self-incrimination. Do you feel responsible what happened to Joni Gunter?
No, sir, I do not feel responsible for her death.
Not at all.
No, sir, not for the cause of her death, no.
One last little point, Mr. Tillis.
Yes, sir.
You have, according to your own testimony, and you're even crying about it, that you have endured so much in an effort to protect your brother, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say I've endured a lot, but it's not just protecting him. It's in a sense accepting responsibility for what I did. If you and I go in a store to rob it, and you shoot the clerk, and the clerk gets killed, and you get away, and I get caught, I went into that store willingly with you to rob that store, and I knew the potential of the clerk getting shot. So I make an agreement with you. We go in the store, you shoot the clerk, you get away, I get caught. And does that mean that I immediately have to tell on you? There's some sort of sense of loyalty to that. Now, when you add into the factor that you're my brother, and we've been through a lot, the factor gets a little more stronger. That's why I put his name in the recording. I told you that. So when they gave me that death penalty, he'd know. He knows.
Okay. So my point is you've endured a lot to protect him. That's a yes.
Well, I'm wearing it right now.
You're wearing it. Okay.
I'm wearing it.
And you have testified under oath on direct examination that you did not ask any questions of your brother about what happened to that girl, correct?
Absolutely not. In future conversations, I never breached the subject.
Never, ever said a word to him.
It was agreed upon when he arrived in the garage that that subject would never be brought up. And it hasn't. It was never.
I got you. Your brother shows up, and he's got a dead body in his trunk, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's all you know.
That's all I know. It's a white car with a Georgia plate. It didn't look like hers. I initially thought it was her car in the beginning, but
So, Mr. Tillis, you just testified in court under oath that your brother committed murder
no, I did not.
because the body was in his trunk.
I never said my brother committed murder.
Just like Joni Gunter's body was chopped up and dismembered in your backyard, correct?
First, I never said my brother committed murder. I said Joni Gunter arrived at my residence in the trunk of my brother's car, and she was deceased. How she met her death, I had no clue. I never said he killed her. To my knowledge, maybe he didn't. Maybe something else happened. I don't know.
Mr. Tillis,
Who knows?
you knew he did it because he brought her to your house.
I didn't. It wasn't a conversation where I asked you, where'd she come from? How'd you do that? What happened? That's not the conversation that occurred, Mr.
Mr.
Mizrahi.
Tillis, if your brother didn't do it, you're saying he just found a woman on the street dead and brought her to your house to dismember her?
You're asking me to make allegations and assumptions.
Mr. Tillis, the point being, you believed your brother was responsible for Joni Gunter's death because he had her body, correct?
He had her in the trunk.
Logical assumption. That's a reasonable assumption. That is why we're here today, because you had Joni Gunter's dismembered body in your backyard, correct?
Well, I can't deny that it's not a logical inference to arrive at that conclusion.
That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions for the witness? Okay, Mr. Tillis, you may resume your seat at the council table.
Sir?
You may resume your seat at council table.
Thank you, sir.